Welcome to our next culinary adventure. We're going to make gazpacho. It's a great veggie-filled soup that is served cold. It's all fresh ingredients and it's perfect for when the weather warms up a little bit. So this one, I'm going to deviate a little bit from the recipe. That's kind of how I usually do things. So I'm going to keep it very quick and easy. Another great example how eating an international food doesn't have to be a lot of work. There are a lot of veggies, but again, I'm going to deviate from the recipe and just try to chop up most of them and put them in my blender. Also, I'm going to be using some dry ingredients, partly because they're so much more convenient to keep on hand, and you can actually adjust the recipe down from using, in this instance, fresh basil to dried basil. From like, typically if a recipe calls for about a tablespoon, you can use a teaspoon. Another quick and easy swap is going to be keeping some garlic powder on hand rather than using cloves of garlic. Cloves of garlic keep really well too, so it's a great option to have on hand. It's just sometimes this can be convenient. And at the store, sometimes they only have the big bottle. It keeps forever, so it's not a bad budget purchase either. So to start off, I'm going to prep some of these vegetables. They're all rinsed and ready to go. Again, it's going to be super simple because I don't mind the tomato seeds or even the cucumber peel, but if you want a nice creamy gazpacho, then you'll want to seed the tomatoes and seed the cucumber and remove the peel. So I cut up the cucumber and I cut up the red bell pepper and the onion. So that's half of a medium cucumber, half of a red bell pepper, and half of a sweet yellow onion. I'm also going to use as much tomato as I can fit in here because the way it's looking is my blender is smaller than the recipe creators. So we'll go ahead and start adding those in. And I am going to do a cut on these tomatoes as well. I'm going to add in my remaining ingredients. The other recipe, which obviously again makes significantly more than what my blender will hold, it calls for 1/4 cup of fresh basil. So I'm going to substitute in some of my dry basil. Because I'm doing about a half recipe, then I'm going to cut it down a little bit more, probably just a couple of teaspoons, not even a tablespoon. If I was going to do the full recipe, I would probably use a tablespoon for my dried basil. So a couple of teaspoons. If you're not a huge fan of basil, you may even want to cut that down to 1 teaspoon. And a half teaspoon of garlic powder. The recipe calls for 3/4 teaspoon of salt. Again, because we're halving it, I'm just going to put in a few cranks of salt. That's probably going to be adequate. We can always add it in later. We can't take it away if we put too much in. And a few cranks of black pepper as well. Our recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of oil, which is going to be 4 tablespoons of oil. Since we're doing half, we'll just put a couple of tablespoons of olive oil in. And lastly, 1 tablespoon of red wine vinegar. I'll put our top of our blender on and take it over to the blender base. As I usually do, I'm going to start it on low and then go up to high.